You're sitting at your desk and someone says something that cuts right through you. Maybe it's your boss dismissing your idea in front of the whole team. Maybe it's a friend making a joke that lands a little too close to something real. You feel it, that quick heat rising in your chest, the tightness in your throat, your jaw locks, your fingers curl. And then, in a fraction of a second, you do what you've always done. You swallow it. You smile. You nod. You move on. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself you're being mature. You tell yourself that reacting would only make things worse. And just like that, the moment passes. But here's the thing no one tells you. The moment didn't pass. It moved. Most people believe that holding your emotions in is a sign of strength. They think emotional restraint is the same as emotional intelligence. That staying calm means you've handled it. That if you don't react, you've won some internal battle. And honestly, it makes sense. We were raised on that idea. Don't cry. Be strong. Don't let them see you upset. It sounds like wisdom. It feels like control. But it's not. What you're actually doing when you suppress an emotion is not eliminating it. You're rerouting it. You're pressing it down from the place where it wants to be expressed and forcing it into your muscles, your organs, your nervous system. You haven't solved the problem. You've just changed its address. In 2013, a team of researchers at the Harvard School of Public Health and the University of Rochester published a study that followed over 700 participants over a 12-year period. They were looking at the relationship between emotional suppression and physical health outcomes. What they found was striking. Participants who consistently suppressed their emotions had a significantly higher risk of premature death, including a 47% increased risk of death from heart disease. Not slightly higher, not marginally, 47%. And this wasn't about personality type or temperament. It was about what happens inside the body when emotions are chronically blocked. When you suppress an emotion, particularly a strong one like anger or grief, your amygdala still fires. Your brain still registers the threat or the pain. But because you're not allowing the natural cycle of that emotion to complete, which includes expression, processing, and release, your nervous system gets stuck in a state of partial activation. Your body is ready to respond, but you've told it not to. And that creates a kind of internal friction that doesn't just disappear on its own. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just a psychological phenomenon. It's deeply chemical. When you suppress an emotion, your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the stress response system stays engaged longer than it should. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, keeps flowing, and cortisol, in small bursts, is actually helpful. It gives you focus and energy. But when it stays elevated because your body is constantly managing unexpressed emotional energy, it starts to cause damage. It weakens your immune system. It increases inflammation. It disrupts your sleep architecture, particularly your deep sleep cycles, which are the ones your body uses for cellular repair. Over time, this creates a pattern. You don't feel sick. You don't feel broken. You just feel tired. Always tired. And you can't figure out why. There's a psychological layer here too. Dr. James Pennebaker at the University of Texas conducted decades of research on the relationship between emotional expression and health. His studies showed that the act of putting feelings into words, whether spoken or written, produced measurable improvements in immune function, reduced doctor visits, and even changed the way the brain processed traumatic experiences. But the reverse was also true. People who avoided expressing difficult emotions showed higher levels of autonomic nervous system activity, meaning their bodies were constantly working harder to keep the lid on something that was pushing to get out. It's like running a program in the background of your computer that you can't see, but it's using up all your processing power. And if you're still watching this, I want you to understand something. What you're learning right now is not theory. It's not abstract science. This is about you, about what might be happening inside your body right now. And if this is resonating with you, I'd ask you to hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Because this channel exists to bring you exactly this kind of understanding, the kind that most people go their entire lives without hearing. Stay with me on this one. It goes deeper than you think. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, emotional suppression is a relatively new behavior. For most of human history, emotions were expressed immediately and physically. Fear made you run. Anger made you fight. Grief made you cry and seek comfort from others. The body was designed to complete these cycles. But modern life introduced something our biology wasn't prepared for: social consequences for emotional expression. You can't scream at your boss. You can't cry in a board meeting. You can't collapse with grief at the grocery store. So instead, you learn to trap it. And your body, which still operates on ancient hardware, doesn't know the difference between a threat you're running from and a feeling you're swallowing. It responds to both the same way. Muscles tighten, heart rate rises, digestion slows, blood pressure increases. The only difference is, when you run from a tiger, the cycle ends. When you suppress an emotion, the cycle never ends. Here's something that seems almost impossible at first. Research published in the journal Psychosomatic Medicine found that individuals who scored high on measures of emotional suppression had significantly elevated levels of C-reactive protein, a key marker of systemic inflammation. Inflammation from unexpressed feelings. That sounds like something out of a self-help book, not a peer-reviewed journal. But the mechanism is surprisingly straightforward. When your stress response stays chronically activated because you're holding emotions in, your immune system shifts into a pro-inflammatory state. It starts behaving as if there's a wound or an infection, even when there isn't one. Your body is literally responding to emotional pain the way it would respond to physical injury. And over time, chronic inflammation has been linked to heart disease, autoimmune conditions, depression, and even certain types of cancer. The paradox is devastating. You hold your emotions in to protect yourself. And in doing so, you create the very conditions that harm you most. And I want to take a brief moment here, because even though this is narrated with an AI voice, I'm a real person behind all of this. My name is Fernando, and I'm genuinely grateful you're here, watching this, giving your time to something that I believe matters deeply. I hope you are eternally blessed for that. There's another dimension to this that often goes unnoticed. Emotional suppression doesn't just affect your body. It rewires your brain. A study from Stanford University, led by Dr. James Gross, one of the leading researchers on emotion regulation, showed that people who habitually suppress their emotions have reduced activity in brain regions associated with emotional awareness and increased activity in areas associated with threat detection. In other words, the more you suppress, the less capable you become of even recognizing what you're feeling, while simultaneously becoming more sensitive to potential danger. You become emotionally numb and hypervigilant at the same time. That's why so many people who hold everything in describe themselves as fine when asked how they are, but live in a state of constant low-level anxiety they can't explain. They've lost access to the signal, but the alarm is still ringing. This also affects your relationships in ways that are hard to see from the inside. When you suppress your emotions consistently, the people around you stop getting accurate information about your inner world. Your partner doesn't know when something is wrong. Your friends don't know when you need help. Your children learn, by watching you, that emotions are something to hide. John Gottman, whose research at the University of Washington has become foundational in relationship psychology, found that emotional withdrawal is one of the strongest predictors of relationship breakdown. Not fighting, not disagreeing, withdrawing, going silent, holding it in. The very thing you think is keeping the peace is the thing that's slowly eroding trust, intimacy, and connection. Because people don't connect to your calm exterior. They connect to your truth. And when you hide that truth, even with good intentions, you create a distance that neither person can fully name, but both can feel. Your muscles know this too. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a psychiatrist and researcher at Boston University, spent decades studying how unexpressed emotional experiences are stored in the body. His work showed that chronic emotional suppression leads to specific patterns of muscular tension, particularly in the jaw, shoulders, lower back, and hips. These aren't random. They correspond to the body's instinctive responses to threat and emotion. The jaw clenches because it wants to speak or scream. The shoulders rise because the body is bracing for impact. The hips tighten because the legs want to run. But you don't speak, you don't brace, you don't run. So the tension stays. And over months and years, it becomes chronic pain. Pain that doctors can't fully explain. Pain that doesn't respond to standard treatments. Because the cause isn't structural, it's emotional. Your body is holding what your mind refused to carry. There's a concept in psychology called the window of tolerance, developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. It describes the zone of arousal in which a person can function effectively, Not too activated, not too shut down. When you suppress emotions repeatedly, your window of tolerance narrows. Things that wouldn't have bothered you before start to feel overwhelming. Small frustrations trigger disproportionate reactions. You snap at your kids. You feel exhausted by a simple conversation. You lie awake at night with your heart racing and your mind spinning, and you don't know why. Because from the outside, your life looks fine. But on the inside, your nervous system has been running on fumes for years. And the thing about a narrow window of tolerance is that it makes you feel like you're weak. Like you can't handle life. But the truth is the opposite. You've been handling too much for too long, without letting any of it out. So here's what changes when you understand this. That scene at your desk. The one where someone says something that cuts through you and you swallow it whole. You now know what happens next. You know the cortisol surge. You know the muscular bracing. You know the inflammation. You know the narrowing of your emotional window. You know the invisible distance it creates between you and the people you love. And you know that none of this is weakness. None of this is brokenness. It is your body asking you, in the only language it knows, to stop storing and start releasing. You don't have to scream. You don't have to make a scene. But you do have to feel it. You have to let the wave move through you instead of building a dam every single time, because the dam doesn't hold forever. It never does. And the flood that comes when it breaks is always worse than the wave you were trying to stop. You were never strong because you held it in. You were surviving, and now you can start living differently. Not by becoming someone who falls apart at every feeling, but by becoming someone who lets the feeling land, acknowledges it, and lets it move. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of a kind of strength most people never reach. The kind that doesn't need armor. The kind that doesn't need silence. The kind that finally lets your body rest. If this hit something real in you, leave a comment and tell me what part stayed with you the most. Hit the like button if you think more people need to hear this. And subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into these conversations, because we're just getting started. Next time, we're going to look at something even more unsettling. What happens to the brain of someone who was told, "You're too sensitive," as a child? And how that single phrase can reshape an entire nervous system for decades. You don't want to miss that one.